Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. It's Thursday, it's the 16th of April 2026. We've got a bright but breezy Cambuslang and we're going to talk about Glasgow Celtic. We're going to go through some news. We're going to look at upcoming fixtures. And I'm delighted to say I'm going to be doing that with two of the best in the business. Let's start with Barry Gallagher first. Hello Barry, how are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Currently enjoying some time off work, so delighted to be here and talk about all things Celtic.
How was your holiday? You had a wee holiday last week. You weren't here. How was it?
I did. I was in Tenerife. It was lovely, thanks. Nice weather, just chilled and watched the Dundee game over there, which was a bit of an ordeal, but I suppose that's an evergreen comment for this season. But no, it was great, thanks, and good to be back.
Great stuff. We're also joined by our wonderful friend Stuart Duggan. Hello Stuart, how are you?
I'm good, thanks to Barry for bringing the weather back, at least superficially, if not in temperature. And nice, I feel like we should timestamp this, that it's Thursday afternoon, just in case any big news breaks that we don't address, so that's quite a novel as well, so I'm enjoying that. Yeah,
absolutely. It's just coming up for 3 o'clock. You'll have your news and weather at the top of the hour. Bit of fun.
I think you fancy yourself as a bit of a weatherman. I could see that as a thing for you, just because you're always talking about it.
You know what I am. I did it one time on the agenda, and then it's just became a bit of a gimmick. But I'm as long as you don't blame it on the weatherman. Famously,
right. Chris Bow's also a weatherman with his hail nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah, we get weather all over the place. Stuart, you're a bit laid up at the moment. Are you okay? Bit of an injury?
I'm good. Yeah, even the Celtic podcasters are getting injured now. I've got some crutches winging their way to me because I've done myself a mischief at fives. And that's just getting old, frankly. I feel like Callum McGregor, where I knew I wasn't in prime physical condition, but I said I would play anyway. And I've torn my calf, so that's what happens.
Were you mid back pass?
I was pointing at someone else to do something. Actually, that is something I do a lot at fives, where I try and dictate the game without taking part in it. I was called. They called my bluff, and that's that. But I'll survive. I'll survive. Hopefully, I'll be fighting fit for the split for the running. That's what everyone else is doing, so I'll do the same.
Absolutely great stuff. Just a reminder, we have a live show on the 24th of May, Sunday the 24th of May at the Flying Duck. Tears of a Cynic Live. There are a couple of tickets left, so if you want tickets, you want to come along. It's the day after the cup final. It's the bank holiday weekend. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a double for Celtic, and if not, we'll be commiserating together. So tickets are available. You can go into Eventbrite and search for the Cynic. If you search for the Cynic Live on Google, it comes up. There's an email if you're a subscriber. A couple of tickets left, so if you want to get in about it as quickly as possible. Looking forward to that. Should be class.
If you want to meet who, this is your chance to do it, to be up close and personal with a very special guest.
Very special indeed. Who? Let's
put it this way: he's named after an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. I think, pretty sure he is. That film.
Yes.
Junior's a film?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I've said too much.
Do we have any players called Commando or Predator? Predator? It's quite odd.
There's a lot of players that don't play, so you do forget.
Exactly. Right, okay. Twins.
Yeah.
That's another one. Opening question, which will lead us to a bit of a chat about the game at the weekend. How are you feeling after the final league match before the split? So at the weekend, we defeated St Mirren by 1-0. We've got St Mirren again this coming weekend in the Scottish Cup, which is a bit of a different vibe from the league, of course. But splits in our sights. Barry, how are you feeling? What's your thoughts on Celtic pushing for the title?
I suppose when at the start of the game on Saturday, I think with the welcome addition of the Green Brigade back, it felt a wee bit different from how it had been. I thought the opening 25, half an hour, there was some good stuff, but as has sort of been the tale of this season, I think whenever the opposition kind of see that we have not changed things or have no sort of wherewithal to change things, as soon as they make a switch or a slight tweak, then it completely changes the game. And I felt at times on Saturday we were hanging on a wee bit. I thought our midfield get kind of overrun. And then you're just kind of willing the final whistle to come, which isn't a nice feeling when you're hanging on a bit like that. And then I suppose there was encouragement for spells of the other two's games. The fact that Hearts were down, and then obviously Rangers were down as well, but they come roaring back. And I suppose it's maybe more a reflection on how they are performing, and in contrast to how we are, because obviously it's great that we won, and I suppose if we have 5 more victories, you would hope that we would be home and hosed. But the way that we are playing, the sort of kind of well-documented lack of a style of play, and the fact that every game seems to be a close one, and it has felt like that for the majority of the season. And then when you see your rivals kind of score 3 and then 6, it kind of knocks the stuffing out of you a wee bit. But to look positively, as I say, we won the game 1-0. Victories are often the mark of champions. But weirdly, I think this is a sort of kind of well-worn phrase. I've seen it in a number of places this week, that you almost feel a wee bit more despondent after Saturday than you did going into it. And I know that sounds mad because we've got a victory on 3 points on the board, but yeah, it's a difficult one. There's probably, I know we'll come on to talk about it, there were some encouraging signs, but it's kind of where we are. And I know, listening to the agenda on Monday, I think the way that Lorenzo kind of finished off with saying about we're in a dogfight and sometimes it's going to be ugly and we just need to kind of hunker down. I think that's the kind of message that I'm kind of taking some solace from. So, yeah, not entirely confident, but I don't think I've been confident the entire season, and we're still hanging on in there. So that's probably the best I can give it right now.
Yeah, well put. I think, that point you make about, almost feeling a little bit despondent afterward, it feels like you build up for the week. You maybe go, you're a bit despondent and you build up and you haven't seen Celtic for those 4 or 5 days and you get excited and you think great, and then you get to the game or you watch the game on TV, Celtic don't perform particularly well, and then you're a little bit despondent, but we get the 3 points and then you build right back up again. It's like a roller coaster in a way, Stu.
It's not a fun one, I have to say, and I quite like a roller coaster, and this is not a fun one. Yeah. To answer your sort of opening question, I think it's hard to explain, but I feel like I could describe it in a sound, which is sort of like, like sort of a horrible exhale. I had a really bizarre situation watching the game where I was in Rochdale at the weekend at a big house with my wife's friends, and so that way where I know her friends well, I get on well with him, but there was like a partner that I didn't know that well, but I heard he was quite into football, and I was like, he'll watch the football with me, that'll be quite good. And we were kind of like sounding each other out, because this was the first time we'd spent any kind of length of time together. She's an Arsenal fan, and quite funnily enough, I'd only managed to fix the stream just as Bournemouth ran through to score their winner against them, so I felt for him. And then we watched the Celtic game, and he was asking me a bit about it, and I was giving him context for the league and how it's unprecedented, but just how poor Celtic have been. And I was like, maybe it'll be different, and I was trying to explain the fans back in and stuff like that. I basically laid out for him, I was like, I think that what will happen is that Celtic will start well, they'll create a few chances, they'll squander those chances, they might take one of those chances, then they'll end up severely under the cosh, we'll probably concede, but then we'll rally and score, and we'll just about get over the line. And the game played out almost exactly like that, without the sort of third act that we've seen so many times. And he sort of drifted out of the game for the start of the second half. He went to the kitchen, came back, and he was like, how's it all going then? And he couldn't believe the difference in the team from the first half, when he was super engaged in that first half an hour, to what he was seeing in the second half. And then by the end, he was looking at me as I was like pretty much hands covering my eyes, just trying to pray for the final whistle and get through it. And all that sort of does, I completely agree with Barry. There are positives. You have to be positive. You have to just keep winning however you get over the line. But I just cannot in any consciousness say like that is a title winning team, or that team are going to go and win the next 5 games. And I really hope I'm proven wrong and I'm made to look a dick, but I know we'll talk about them. I tend to side more with sort of Chris Sutton's vision of things, where you have to go on what you're seeing week in, week out, and Celtic are just getting by, and it's not enough. And both Hearts and Rangers had their character questioned at the weekend, and really, fair enough, the Hearts penalty thing was a bit weird, but they've both answered those things, passed the test with pretty much flying colours on both occasions, as poor as they were for the majority Hearts for the majority of the game and Rangers that first half. And I just think that even when we are getting points on the board, we're not passing the test. And I thought that we were lively in the first sort of 20, 30 minutes. I felt quite positive. And if you are looking for positives, as we look across the season, we've beaten St Mirren 1-0 3 times now, if I'm not mistaken. So if you look at the cup game as an outlier, the cup final as an outlier, St Mirren, for their league position, have caused us problems. And in that regard, it is good to just get over the line. But the ease with which St Mirren controlled the game in the second half is a real concern. And I was very shocked listening to the stats and the debrief with Will, where
I've got them here if you want me. I know the stat you're talking about.
Pass per the defensive action thing. So
essentially, on a Tuesday, we do a debrief with our good friend Will, our analyst, and we debrief the game from the weekend. So there is a stat called PPDA, which is passes per defensive action, and what that represents is essentially it's like a pressing stat. So it's how many passes the opposition make before Celtic challenge. Usually it's around 5. I think in terms of, on average, it's about 5 to 7, right? So they usually make 5 to 7 passes before Celtic step on and press them. Also, the tool that's used, they split each half into thirds. So the first third of the second half, Celtic's PPDA was 88. It's usually 5. Overall, it was 13.7, which kind of represents essentially that they had a lot more time on the ball, Barry. They weren't being pressed. Essentially, our press kind of just collapsed. So, on average, it's about 5. For that game, it was 13 to 14. And at some points, it was mentally high.
Yeah, and that came across. That kind of was what your eyes were telling you as well. And I suppose that goes to the point that both Stu and I were making about it did feel like we were hanging on at points without St Mirren being too threatening, but I suppose there's just a nervousness around Celtic Park just now, and with good reason, I think. And I know that some of the players have commented on that, but it's often said that the crowd needs something from on the pitch to keep us going, and vice versa. But when players are passing the ball out of the park, etc., and there's just this of no press and just allowing them to have the ball, and I know that O'Neill commented on that as well, didn't he? Like the lack of energy that we had. So it doesn't seem like that's the instruction. So it just feels like there isn't enough instruction, or the instructions they are getting aren't clear enough for the players. But yeah, it's a difficult one because we're allowing them to have the ball. We don't look like creating too many chances as well, and it just kind of feels like unless we get a really good gilt-edged chance and we have to take at least one of them, which luckily we did, we're going to struggle in most games. And the worrying thing, I suppose, going into the split is that the last 3 games that we've played haven't been top 6 teams. And you would imagine, just by the nature of it all, that we will play better teams who will create chances against us, and whether we're confident enough to kind of keep them out, I wouldn't be so sure. So yeah, I suppose the stats back up with what we're seeing, and it just kind of adds to that nervousness, which ultimately is pouring onto the pitch as well, because I think Ralston mentioned it, didn't he, in his comments after the game. And then there was the thing where McGregor was kind of applauding Scales, and I think I was similar to, was it Paul that said on the reaction? I thought that was he was applauding him for passing the ball backwards, but it was actually applauding him to kind of G him up a wee bit, because you could hear the sort of consternation in the stands.
And just another stat, we're not going to do a big stat thing, but just this one was kind of highlighted, and it was about forward passing. Stu, I want to get your thoughts on this. So on Saturday, McGregor had 9 forward passes, Oxlade-Chamberlain had 2, which is a combined forward passes of 11. If you compare that to last season in the game that we played almost a year ago, which was a 5-1 victory over Kilmarnock, there was 36. And I believe young Devaney had about 18 on his own. That's one of the issues. I think people are talking about the midfield more than anything in terms of how we're performing. What's your thoughts on it, Stu?
It's very bizarre, and something that I find more frustrating than ever is that it's not so much that, I mean, those stats are very galling, but it's the fact that we're not even attempting to play through the midfield. The amount of times that we'll just shell it long, I find wild, like on the eye. Like, it's so horrible to watch and so out of character. And also just really, you're not being direct. Well, you are being direct by doing that, but it's not purposeful. It's not like, right, we're going to go long because we've got players that are going to run into those places, or we've got someone that's going to win the ball and then someone's going to come and win the second ball when they knock it down. It is just get rid sort of football, like real Route 1, real like pub league sort of tactic. And regarding, it happened a lot in that sort of 15-minute spell where we were really pegged back, to the point where I almost thought that, and this, I don't think this is the case because of what the manager said and because of the DNA of the club and the way that team and the players in it have played for so long. It was almost like we were happy to sit in and just be a penalty box defending side, the way that perhaps St Mirren or a Dundee or someone would do to us at Celtic Park. And I wondered if it's because we've been losing goals quite quickly in the second half that's then completely derailed the game, whether there's been a conscious effort to, for the first 10, 15 minutes of the second half, we're not going to concede a goal. So lump it, give them the ball. If we're in our position, I think they fancy themselves as pretty solid in that sort of lineup. You saw that at Ibrox where they had, 90, 120 minutes and couldn't be breached. And I wondered if that was a tactic, and that's insane if that is, and it's also insane if they've just played their way into that as a collective. If that's how they're managing the game, they come under a little bit of pressure and they think, let's just hold what we have here until we can work our way back into the game, and that is not acceptable as a Celtic team, and it's not even good enough to compete really in the league, because if St Mirren, Barry made the point, they didn't actually really look like scoring, but it's in situations like that where we invariably give away a penalty, or someone makes a mistake, or it's a deflection, or you bring in chances like quite a big factor in whether or not you concede goals, and I just don't think that should even be on the table. And with regards to like the midfield and forward passing and actually actively using the midfield, I thought it improved a lot when Engels came on.
Yeah.
And I think that because of the way that we're setting up tactically, the only real chance that we have, I think, of making any noticeable change in the way that we play is with personnel. And so hopefully Engels being back helps that, or helps mitigate that slightly, because that's not acceptable.
Barry, you missed the chat last week on, the striking position, Shvanshara, another game, a performance that doesn't really fill you with confidence. He's going to go on a run of scoring. And then Kelechi Iheanacho comes on, and again, small flashes, but the whole complete package doesn't seem to be, again, like he's going to go on a run. As Stu says, personnel's probably the only way. We're probably going to play the same way for the rest of the season. Is it about just either persevering or changing up that number 9 position?
Yeah, I was surprised after his performance at the ends that when I saw the lineup coming out before the game on Saturday that he'd gone with Shvanshara again, because I thought he kind of stunk the place out and do much. And like you say, Kelechi came on and he had a couple of kind of chances where he was unlucky. But I'm kind of getting to the point of thinking, particularly for the Rangers game and the Hearts game, that I would think I would go with Dyson through the middle. Yeah. I know he's not scored since January, which is a long, long time, but things just seem to happen when he's up there, and whether that allows for chances for the likes of Nygren, etc., I would be more than happy with that, because I can't even remember Shvanshara having a chance in the first half. I may be wrong. And obviously Kelechi can't play the full 90 minutes or whatever, so it's just we knew from the closing of the summer window that we needed a striker. We never got it, and we all thought, surely to God, that we'll have a striker lined up for the window open in January. We obviously missed loads of chances against Rangers in the derby, which we went on to lose, and then we've kind of done the whole sort of throw enough shit at the wall with the strikers we brought on loan, and none of them have cut it. So Yeah, that would kind of be my idea of Dyson, and then it allows you to get, I suppose, another winger in there or kind of another option into midfield, but it's not ideal at all. And I know that we have missed a lot of chances this season, but it feels like chances are starting to dry up even more than they were, which isn't great at all.
It's funny, I was clearing off some audio clips that we've got saved on my computer, and I clicked on one, and it was Martin O'Neill it would have been the last week of the window, talking about bringing players in. We desperately need players to come in to help the boys that are already here, sort of thing. And it's just not worked out. I mean, how bad must Junior Adamu be that he can't even make the bench, Stuart?
Well, come to the live show and we'll ask him. I think that, it is bad, and it's bad that he's no longer an option. And I think that the striking position it's really in sharp focus because it has been all season and not just recently. Whereas, start of the season, you looked at the midfield and going, "Oh, we're actually stacked here. We're in a good place." But now that's kind of coming into focus too. I think it's weird in the last couple of weeks seeing the players that O'Neill clearly trusts and who he doesn't. And I find it really bizarre that Hatate's fallen out, and I find it really bizarre that Taneki's fallen out as well. And that is two obviously deeply frustrating players, but players that do have moments of real quality in them occasionally. And even a player like Taneki has shown you can't really trust him to start, but you can trust him to come in and impact games when you're struggling. And I feel like when we have been struggling recently, he's now turning to Luke McCowan and James Forrest, which is just a bit of a different narrative. With Chvanchara, I thought he missed. There was a couple of chances in the really early doors where he should kind of lift it over. I think it's given as offside, but it looked pretty marginal. So that's one where if he actually tucks it away, maybe on VAR you give that. And then I think just before the goal as well, he sort of makes a dreadful kind of, just puts it straight at the keeper. I can only assume that he's been put in for his work rate, because he does really put himself about, and I don't know whether or not that's seen as like pressing. Obviously we press in such a disconnected fashion that it's almost not worth doing, because you're so all over the place that you're just creating gaps for people to play through. But he can do that maybe a bit better than Kelechi can, just from a fitness perspective. And then in the second half, you would hope that when Kelechi comes on, you're going to get a little bit of quality. But the chance that he misses from Dyson's cross is the best chance of the game, and it should be bread and butter for anyone. That's the sort of thing that, I don't know, you would really hope, like Adam Ida would score, Johnny Kenny would score, and these are players that we've absolutely said aren't good enough to play for Celtic. And I'm not suggesting revisionist history of like you shouldn't have got rid of them, but it's more just extra evidence of how poorly the recruitment has been done and how much it's failed in January.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the Celtic, like the injured players we've got and players coming back from injury, Martin O'Neill said, this is a quote from him: "We will try to get a bounce game for some of the players coming back. That was the plan for Alistair Johnson's return from his time in Canada. We were going to organise that and it would help. We don't want to rush people back, but if they're feeling good and want to have a bounce game, that would be ideal." Barry, I don't know if it'll probably unlikely happen this week, but might happen next week. So potentially you might have other players for the bench, for the squad, for that first game against Falkirk. Positive news slightly if we can get a bounce game and we can get some of these guys available.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of seems like a throwback, doesn't it? The idea of a bounce game. Makes you think of like De La Pena and Danny playing in those trialist games. But no, I think anything that can sort of mimic game time in a sort of unofficial sense would be ideal for the likes of Arne Engels and Alistair Johnson, etc. would be ideal. And yeah, I think you could see that we're down to the bare bones on Saturday, and the addition of ready first team players who've kind of sort of gone and been in these sort of crunch games before, you're going to need them. So I would welcome it. And yeah, there's probably players who've not had much time off the bench as well who would benefit from that as well. So yeah, I was wondering if Celtic would maybe go away. You know how I think Rangers are maybe away just now in Spain. I know they obviously don't have they've got the free weekend, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I think it would be good to see, and then obviously hoping that they don't end up injured, because that has seemed to be the way of it this season, that as soon as they come back they're out again, and it sets them back for longer than they were in the first time. But yeah, I think it's a positive thing.
Obviously, after the weekend, Hearts, Rangers, Celtic, first, second, third, 33 games played. Celtic have got 67 points, Rangers have got 69, and Hearts have got 70. Goal difference, I think just forget it. Our goal difference is 24, Hearts is 30, Rangers is 35. So it really is, Stuart, about winning every game. You just have to win every single game and then just go from there.
You have to win it, yeah, every single game, and I do think that as fans, you have to take it a game at a time as well. Just with the permutations, like I'm finding most weekends, I'm tying myself in knots before, during, and after games, where you think, right, well, the game state is this currently, so how far out does that actually put us if it stays like this, or if we concede, or if this happens in that game, and then looking at the fixtures, going, well, fancy them to take points off them, or that could happen here and it leaves us here, and it's just a road to madness. There are permutations where we could win the league at a canter. There are permutations where, the one that really scares me, that even though there's only 5 games left, the thought that if Hearts win the next 4 games, they win the league, like as in it's done. You're like, oh my god, that's terrifying. And then there's a permutation where Rangers win the league at Celtic Park and halfway through, and so you just have to win a game at a time. I think those players can help coming back in if we can get them up to speed, because I feel like the 3 players in question all offer something that we're currently lacking. With Johnston, it's athleticism and leadership, and there's people that are kind of hiding and not really wanting to stand up and be counted. With Engels, he's very athletic, but his set pieces, I thought, made a big difference as well, where suddenly you look a bit more of a threat from corners. And then young Osborne, obviously we've not seen very much of him, but he just appears to be much more dynamic than any of the other options that we have. So if we can get them in, just keep going a game at a time, maybe some results go your way in those first 2 fixtures. I think we have to win those next 2 and then just see where you are coming into the Rangers game.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at other news, actually, well, before we do that, Chris Sutton, this is comment you mentioned, kind of referred to it a little bit. This was comments on the warm-up, which is the YouTube show he's got with Chris Boyd and that. So the quotes are, "Do we now think it's a 2-horse race? I'm now ruling Celtic out of the title race. Martin O'Neill says Celtic need to win all 5 games. The thing about the weekend is I've never seen St Mirren in all my years in Scottish football go to Celtic Park and play like that in the second half. It's an amazing turnaround in terms of style. They were like Brazil. Celtic could not get the ball off them. They were popping it around and it was like all A's. The reason Celtic cannot win the league is that they don't control games. They don't have that control. The midfield 3 that have started the last 2 games, McGregor, Oxley, Chamberlain and Nygren, I don't think they have the legs in there. You have the striking situation. You're saying if Iheanacho is fit, but that's a big if. The fact that Martin isn't starting him and going for Chvanchara, who quite clearly isn't a natural goal scorer, he's going to have to muddle through games, and I really don't see it happening. Celtic cannot win 5 games. I don't think there's the fear factor from Rangers and Hearts going to Celtic Park anymore. Pretty sobering stuff from a Celtic icon. Barry, when you read stuff like that, there's a part of me that my back goes up a little bit, which is ridiculous, but at the same time, it is what it is. How do you take those kind of comments on board? Because obviously Chris Sutton is still probably really quite close with Martin O'Neill, but he's very open, very candid about what his thoughts are on Celtic. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
It's funny you say that, because I was the same as you. My back kind of naturally goes up. It's almost like don't talk about the family outside of the family, kind of that sort of thing. But I would much rather that than, I know we might come on to another couple of sort of pundits or ex-Celtic players who think everything's rosy and everything's rosy in the garden. So there's maybe a balance to be had. But I don't think there's much wrong with what he's saying. Like, on the evidence, can we all hand on heart say that we are going to be capable of winning these 5 games? I'd say no. And he's only calling it as he sees it. So, yeah, it's funny because obviously Celtic means everything to us, and you don't kind of like someone to put the boot in, but it's probably no harsher than what we've been saying at some points this season, and it tells the story of what's going on in the pitch. It's interesting the point you made there about him being close to Martin O'Neill. I know he had that sit down with him, didn't he, maybe about a month, 6 weeks ago. Maybe longer, actually. I wonder what O'Neill actually believes with what he's come into. But yeah, I think that, again, to go down that route that Lorenzo mentioned in the agenda on Monday, like, we know it isn't pretty, we know we're in a dogfight, and we do just the old cliche, take it one game at a time. But as I say, what Sutton says does have a lot of truth in it, and that's probably why it does hurt, because we all know how bad it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact he said Celtic can't win these games, we can. I'm not saying we will, but we can. Also, see, flipping it around a little bit, Stu, right? Obviously, there's a lot of, Celtic aren't creating a lot of chances, and we are not scoring goals. But could there be a certain level of pressure on Hearts and Rangers when they come to Celtic Park? Because, see, I've seen it a few times. Frank McAvenny's mentioned it. There's no fear factor with Celtic anymore. Sutton mentioned it there. But is there maybe... Do you think they could take their eye off the ball because they maybe think Celtic are not as good as we thought, and maybe Hearts have beaten us, already at Celtic Park? Rangers have beaten us at Celtic Park. Is there a small chance that they turn up and aren't as prepared for what we could give them?
I don't think it's a case of being underprepared, but I do think that there is a little bit of a case with Sutton's comments. He's bang on the money. Like, I can't disagree with that, as annoying as that is to hear. And I would rather he was direct about it than some of the comments that we'll come on to discuss. I wonder if there is a little bit of trying to get an ounce of motivation out of the team by being the one that's coming out and saying it, where they're like, well, we've got a point to prove now. You're sort of pin that to the dressing room kind of chat. And I don't think that Sutton, as much as he loves the club, I don't think he's invested enough to think on it on those kind of terms. I think he is just being honest. But I think that maybe there's just an element of like possum with Celtic in the scenario you're talking about, where teams come and they think we can get at them, and then maybe it is just the day that it clicks for Celtic, because we do have good players and we do have, course and distance for winning titles. It's just on the evidence that we're seeing that doesn't seem that likely. But I would have said, for all any money that he wanted when we went into that cup game going to Ibrox, that we were going to get battered, and I feel like there was an element there where they just couldn't get it done, and I wonder if that plays a little part, and I wonder the mentality of those players when they come, if it goes to the last game and Hearts have to win at Celtic Park, I think that will be really, really difficult for those players. But I think that those kind of games might suit Hearts better because they prefer being the underdog. And I think the more that Celtic become the underdog in this title race, the better chance they actually have.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a position that suits us, even if it's not one that comes naturally to us. And I think that maybe O'Neill is aware of that as well. I think when you're talking about what he must actually think of the team, I think he probably thinks quite similar to Sutton. He's not daft. I think he knows what he's got. I think he sees that there's he talks about it. He says, there are things that this team lacks, and I think the thing that we lack are quality, and good players. And I think he's so aware of that. And at the weekend when he was talking about energy and stuff, he even looked a bit like, yeah, I can see where this is going. Yeah. I can see where this is going. And I think generally about the whole thing, it feels like the wind up to the punch, like you're just waiting for it and you don't quite know when it's going to come, and that's what's making it worse. And we often talk about, Alan, formerly of this parish, loves talking about the different ways to beat Rangers, and you could have like the League Cup final where they absolutely batter you and you score 1-0 with an offside goal, or you beat them on penalties to knock them out of the cup at Ibrox, or you just go and beat them 5-0, and how it's like, what's the best or worst way to win or lose? And I have a horrible feeling that this is going to be the worst way to lose the league, where you know that it's really fine margins, and if you'd just been like 2% better over the course of the season, you would win the league. But you just haven't been good enough, and you haven't been able to get to the level consistently enough that you're going to either lose on goal difference or lose by the odd point. And I think that's going to be horrible. That's not cheered anyone up. Sorry.
I hated it. It was good. I loved the phrase "wind up to the punch," by the way, and I will be using that throughout my life in various situations. So thank you.
I'm sorry that you're going to be in so many of those situations.
I'll probably be using it like, I'm at dinner and I'm having my my starter, and then it gets taken away, and the main course is coming. I'm like, oh, here's the wind up to the punch.
That's one way to use it.
It doesn't necessarily make any sense, Stuart. Okay,
yeah,
but thank you.
It does.
My wife is going to be thoroughly annoyed with that phrase. Did you want to come in there, Barry?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's terrifying what Stu's sort of outlining there, but if it is going to be like losing it on goal difference or losing it by the odd point, I think I would rather be out of it with two games to go. I would rather try and make my peace with the fact that the season's done, rather than that going into the last game with the fact that you could win the last game points wise and still not win the title because of the goal difference. So yeah, I would rather take my cyanide early and get the hell out of there.
Let me ask you this, right? See if Celtic are out of it and it comes to the last game of the season and the league's already been decided or whatever. Will you go?
I don't think I'd want to be anywhere near that, no.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a ticket. I wouldn't be seeking one out for it.
There's 2 tickets available for you from this panel, but yeah, I mean, like I think I can understand why people would want to go and kind of protest, but I'm not sure I could face. So that we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. You both kind of alluded to another Celtic player talking about passing comment. So Scott Brown, former Celtic captain. Here's some quotes about Celtic. It's not been a perfect season, far from it, but the manager and the players have found a way to keep winning football. For games of football, it's about keeping the faith. Yeesh. If they go and win this league after all the pressure and all the criticism of the board, the players and managers coming in and leaving, it will be the best league win ever. There are a lot of vultures out there in social media and podcasts who think they know how to run the club better. It's as if people think Celtic can just go and spend £20 million on a player because the money is in the bank. But if you do that and then you don't make the Champions League, then what happens? The club starts going into the red. So everyone has to come together because that's one of the biggest things in football, togetherness. The fans, the players and the board need to come together for what's left of the season, and then some big decisions can be made in the summer for what direction they go in. I mean, brother, the summer, some big decisions need to be made in the summer. Those decisions, if they're not being made at this point, and we don't win the league, there's some big issues right on the horizon. Like Scott Brown, probably fishing for a job, you know. He's out of work after getting sacked at Ayr United. Just not talking with any sort of. Stu, would you say something? Like I just it annoys the fuck out of me, so I'll have to bite my tongue a bit.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating because I think when you start reading those quotes, I think he's talking with, a conservative approach where you don't want to come right out and say this has been a dog's dinner and like what an absolute shit show, it's never been worse, all of that sort of line. Because, he's got friends in this playing squad, he's got friends at the club, and I think he is just trying to toe the party line. But to say things like players, like fans want Celtic to go and buy a £20 million player is just willful ignorance. And to not talk about the situation but not acknowledge it in real terms is what's very counterproductive, especially with the position that he holds, in the eyes of the fan base. And I think that, there is nobody, certainly not now. Maybe at the start of the season we would have been like, let's go and buy one £20 million player and then we'll be great and we'll beat Bayern Munich. Celtic could spend the money that they've probably wasted on tax for the money sitting in the bank on it as a net spend. As it happens, with money going out, we're not even spending 20 million total on our recruitment because we're making profit on players. Even as we go into this big rebuild in the summer, you're already seeing players like Benjamin Nygren linked with these big summer moves. They were talking about record transfer fees, and obviously you've knocked back 25 or 26 million pounds for Arne Engels. Celtic won't really spend like 20 or 30 million pounds total on this rebuild. So the notion that you want to just go, or that anyone's clamouring for one player at that value that would destroy the wage structure is just fanciful. And it's just very lazy. And I understand that he's saying that the players in the management team deserve credit for just keeping on finding a way to win. And they do, and if they win the league, absolutely they will be showered in praise for having the tenacity to get through that in such difficult circumstances. But to just not acknowledge where we are currently and how we got here is kind of pointless, and I think it's quite naive of a Celtic captain of his standard.
I think as well, Barry, like the whole idea of you could spend money, but if you don't make it into the Champions League, what happens then? It's like we've got a rainy day fund but they are creating the rainy day. You know, you spend £3 million on a striker for that one Kairat game, you make 45 million. You don't, you know, everything that has happened happens, and it's almost like they're preparing us for. Roll out Scott Brown, tell him to criticise fan media because, you know, we don't like them, we don't want like criticism, fair enough. Tell him that actually we're probably not going to spend much money because we're not in the Champions League and we don't want to get into debt. Remember, Rangers went out of business, LOL. Like, it just seems like these are all just talking points at the board. They must be delighted with it.
Yeah, it's almost as if he was sort of briefed on what to say before this. But when we were in the Champions League, we spent the money on Engels, Ida, and Trusty, and you could argue, did we get value for money for them? Maybe not, but they all contributed to getting us out of the group stage for the first time in ages. So yeah, it's just lazy. It's a kind of pot shot. It seems like it's kind of open season on the Celtic support this season when we're the people who are there through thick and thin, and we're the ones who actively pay to watch Celtic when none of these people have done or probably ever have done in their lives. And it's kind of short memories as well. But it seems to me that Scott Brown is maybe hoping for a part of Robbie Keane's backroom staff, God forbid.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And it's interesting that it takes Chris Sutton, who is not from Scotland. He's obviously fell in love with Celtic when he came here. He's probably more detached from the situation, than the likes of Neil Lennon and Scott Brown and Charlie Mulgrew have been, who I know Scott Brown didn't grow up a Celtic fan, but he loved the club as well. And it's kind of like how their bread's buttered with the board, and it's interesting. But yeah, I would much rather stand with Chris Sutton than I would with Scott Brown on his kind of recent views of the club.
Yeah,
of the support, actually. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think it just feels like this whole season has been open season on the Celtic support one way or the other, and you know I'm really tired of it. And I'm also it's just. Well, I get these guys need to stay relevant within their own kind of mind of, you know, staying relevant in the Scottish football sphere for job persistence and all that. But it's just, there's a way to do things. Just have a bit of nous about you. You don't have to start criticising the support, but I'm sure they kind of don't care either. Charlie Mulgrew had some comments. I just want to read them out. So he says, so he was on a podcast. Oh, he said Celtic should buy a £20 million player. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, a bit of fun. We laugh. Come on. He said, I thought, let me just see. I'm not using paper at the moment. I'm using my computer, so it's quite odd.
Do you know what year it is?
No, I like to print things out. I do, and have it in front of me. I think, although we say that Celtic and Rangers will get better, I think Celtic's not a quick fix. There's so much needing done there. The recruitment department, a manager needing to come in. They're talking about a sporting director. I mean, the recruitment was good for years. And then Paul Tisdale comes in, and it's not good at all. So he moves on. Obviously, John Kennedy had a big part to play in that. He had a lot to say in the players, so there's a lot needing sorted at Celtic. I don't think it's a quick fix, because right now they're obviously trying to get over the line to win. It's just this idea, Stuart, that comes out that they're now, I don't know if they're, again, it feels like they're being briefed by someone that blame everything on Paul Tisdale. We just have to replace one guy. Everything was fine. He came in, he ruined it, but we'll fix it by putting Sean Maloney there. It feels like there's something in the ether with that.
A little bit, to be fair. Charlie Mulgrew is a bit like you spin the wheel and you see what you get, and sometimes he speaks sense and sometimes it's just funny, sometimes it's drivel. And I guess that kind of falls a little bit closer to the drivel category, where it's, again, just far too simplistic and almost willfully ignorant to how Celtic have done their transfer business. I think that before Paul Tisdale, you can certainly highlight to maybe about a 10-year spell where Celtic did have a conveyor belt of very successful transfers, but all those transfers were in the midst of just extreme waste and financial inefficiency, bringing in terrible players that you were stockpiling and hoarding that contributed absolutely nothing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a successful model. It just means that once a season, twice a season for a run of seasons, you got quite lucky probably, and it's not the mean that it's been a successful recruitment strategy. Tisdale doesn't really have any hits to his name, so and just with the drop off, especially this season, you've seen, and obviously being tired with Nancy as well. Yeah, he becomes low hanging fruit and quite an obvious target, but it just doesn't speak to the actual issues at the club. And sometimes as well, it's not even about the players that they identified. Barry, last night you sent the article, and it feels like every fucking week it's someone. Well, and I tell you what, it'll be Andoni Iraola as well, where it's players that were linked with Celtic at a time at which you were able to get them. It was Michael Elise, an article linking him with us when he was at Reading, and now he's pretty much the best player in the world. And it's just, there's always them. So it's not necessarily about the identification. It's sometimes to do with the penny pinching, all the way, this golden period that he's talking about, letting a player like John McGinn slip through your fingers for a couple £100,000 as an example. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about Paul Tisdale is he was appointed by this board. So,
exactly, yeah.
Barry, it's like the lack of accountability. It's like, our system's all broken, and we need to fix it. And it's like, because of how you've managed it, and there's no accountability for it. And we'll talk about the changes in the boardroom in a minute, but there's just no accountability for anything.
No, it's always someone else's fault, as we've seen from some of the kind of hastily put together statements that were on the club website a few months ago. But yeah, no mention of Peter Lawwell's son heading up the disastrous transfer window in Rodgers' first season back, where most of those players have now left the club. Some of them are still on loan because we couldn't get rid of them permanently. It's as if they don't realise that the support care deeply about the club, and we know everything inside out about how we operate. We know how transfer windows go. I know you did that feature, Gall, about January transfer windows all the way back to 2009, 2010. So they're picking the wrong fight if they think they can that we're goldfish and we forget everything beyond this season, which is mental. And I always remember when Tisdale was appointed, we spoke on the pod that it felt like he was going to be just like a sort of patsy, that if things went wrong, he would be the sacrificial lamb. And that played out to be the case. I know that he was a sort of shyster himself, but yeah, it's mental that it just seems like that's an easy pot shot. Blame him, because obviously he's not going to come back and defend himself or tell what was really going on. And it all seems like it's building to a disastrous summer, which is terrifying. Like, if people think it's bad just now, I think you should sort of buckle in, because the size of the rebuild is mental, and obviously it doesn't help that it's a World Cup summer as well. That will be sort of used as an excuse that we're looking at players at the World Cup when there's no chance we'll be looking at players at the World Cup. So yeah, it's crazy. The only sort of positive I take from that is that Mulgrew is starting to sort of realise how big the rebuild is going to be. So that's the most sensible thing he's said in quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did see, sorry to interrupt, I saw another funny clip probably from that same thing where he was talking about Hearts and how Hearts players should be treated at the end of the season. He was talking about how if Hearts lose the league by like 2 or 3 points and Cammy Devlin's sitting on his holidays and people go up and go, "Good season, mate, you've had a good season," like how they should feel about that. And he's like, well, if you want to play with the big boys, you can't expect it. You've got to take your disappointments in the chin. You can't expect to be patronising thumbs up because you got close.
Yeah,
I just really like the idea of someone that Cammy Devlin looks down from his, I don't know, Andy McNabb book or
Bravo 60 or whatever.
Is that what it is? Randy McNabb. It's from Alan Partridge.
I know. No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did that Paul Callan thing again. I do where you go, oh, it's a good thing you don't laugh. Apologies. It's not worse.
It's all right.
So there was news yesterday about a change to the board. I'll just read out parts of the statement. Celtic today announced that Tom Allison has retired from the board of Celtic plc. Tom, a leading Scottish businessman, has been a lifelong Celtic supporter, blah, blah, blah. Since joining the board, Tom has made an outstanding contribution to the development of Celtic and our success. He joined the board as a non-executive director in September 2001 under the chairmanship of Brian Quinn. At that time, he was chief executive, blah, 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 of Clyde Port. Tom brought all of his experience and expertise to bear on his role at Celtic and has been its senior independent director since 2005. His quote, "It has been a great pleasure to serve the board of Celtic for nearly 25 years. The transformation of our club over that period has been enormous." Brian Wilson says, Tom joined the Celtic board at a time of transition and the club has continued to benefit from his business expertise and wise counsel throughout the intervening years. Dermot Desmond, Celtic's non-executive director and principal shareholder. Tom has made an enormous personal contribution to Celtic. He has been a key advisor to me at all stages and brought his wisdom to the many challenges which have arose over the years. Tom is a person of vision and he has brought that vision to all his endeavours. The wisdom and expertise that Tom brought to the board is unmatched and irreplaceable. I am indeed indebted to him for his wholehearted commitment. He came at a time of upheaval and transformation. It's good that he's leaving at a time of sustainability and security. Barry, it's again, is this the start of the dominoes beginning to fall? Is this just because essentially a non-executive director, I think it's around 9 years they're usually there
That's
for.
right, yeah.
He's been there since 2001, brother. I mean, if that doesn't show you the issues, then I don't know what will.
Yeah, I think there's kind of been talk of this for a while, and I remember there was a story that round about the AGM that Lowell, Allison and actually Brian Wilson were ready to stand down, but again, just kind of rumours that Dermot Desmond didn't want to see he didn't want it to appear as if
weakness.
The fans had forced this. But I think he can dress it up as much as you like. If that's Lowell and Allison gone, I think there'll be another couple in the summer. And I think that is directly because of the collective. And obviously because of their shortcomings as well. So kind of take Desmond's comments with a pinch of salt. It was interesting, the wording of it though, that he's been a great advisor to me. Like he kind of, so is that him kind of putting the blame on him a wee bit because he's going out the door?
Yep.
And did I see somebody 78? Is that right?
Yeah, I think he's
Like, what business what can he offer a football club in the 21st century at that age? You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm happy for him to have been gone. Happy for him to have gone, and hopefully it is the start of the sort of the dominoes or the pack of cards, whatever analogy you want to use, that we can have a sort of clear out in the boardroom.
What about you, Stu? Does it feel like that? Does it feel like potentially there will be a sort of change, or do you think they will kind of keep mainly in place?
I think it's rats off a sinking ship, to be honest. I think it's announcing it now before you're tarred with the big brush that comes if Celtic finish third and if we don't win any silverware this season, and obviously the demand for changing. I think the point that Barry made there is I would completely believe that Desmond wouldn't want to seem like they were balking at the collective's demands for change. I think that something that maybe the Celtic fan base at large are a little bit disadvantaged by is probably a lack of knowledge of these guys, like really knowing who's who and who needs to go, because the volume of people like Tom Allison that you still have attached to the top end of the club will probably still be a significant enough stronghold with Desmond's inner circle that if you bring in fresh faces, they are probably going to find that a frustrating and difficult environment to actually enact any change. If you look at your man, what was Paul's mate called? Dom Mackay. Yeah, very, very difficult to put any actual cultural change in place when you have a bank of people that are just going to outvote you or block you or have the ear of the Desmond, essentially. I was going to give him a title, but he doesn't really have one. So I think it's good that they're going. I think Wilson will go as well by the end of the season. But it's not.
If they replace Tom Allison with Ross Desmond,
exactly. Yeah,
he hates us.
And I think it's window dressing. Ultimately, it's not necessarily a big statement of structural change or we're going to do things completely differently. And the other thing as well is just that for the club to release a glittering statement about him when I'm pretty sure they still haven't acknowledged that John Kennedy's left the club and that Kasper Schmeichel's going to retire and all that. It's like who gets the fanfare, who gets the send off? It's some decrepit old man that you don't know what he does. He's just been literally guzzling lobsters at the club for the last 15, 20 years. I say that because I don't know how many lobsters they would have had when he first got there 25 years ago, but the going's been pretty good for them since. So
the gravy's good tonight.
The gravy's good tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we'll just see how it plays out. I'm not overly happy about it. I don't necessarily think it's that big of a thing until something else happens in relation to it, until there's big movement. And again, we're all very much in flux at the moment because we're pushing for this title. So I really do not think there's a section of our support, I think, which I understand, who maybe just go on the Saturday and aren't really bothered about anything else, but I think they might be shocked about how much work really needs to be done. And if you're not doing it at this point, it's such a big, huge... Because essentially my fear is we get to that opening game of the season, or the Europa League qualifiers, or the Champions League qualifiers, or whatever, and we've pretty much...
League qualifiers.
We've still got the same players, and nothing much has changed. And I think people could be shocked, but, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
The same players minus all the loan players, which takes a bit...
Well, you get
40% of your chance. Your squad, sorry.
Get Louis Palmer back, Mike Nawrocki,
Johnny Kenny.
There's a Barry put in some breaking news that the Celtic B team will be pulling out from the Lowland League, and this leads into a kind of point that was made about Ben Gannon-Doak. So Darren O'Day was on again. I think it was another podcast, and he was talking about when Doak was in and around Celtic. Here's some quotes. So he's what you call a generational talent. There's no coach, certainly not me, that's going to turn around and say, "Coach that." He just had it. There are two parts to it: taking care of it and managing his expectations, because he's in a rush. He did it pretty quickly. He was one you just watched and you just knew. Ben Doak thought he was getting held back at times, and he made his debut at 16. Do you know what I mean? But that's the mentality of him, and he's probably right. He probably was good enough when he was 15. He was one you just watched, and the very few of, I can only think in Celtic's kind history, 3 or 4, I can think off the top of my head, but he's one you just knew straight away. So it's actually become a responsibility to take care of him. So I've been critical of Celtic's all the pathway stuff and opportunities for young players and stuff. This one though, I think's very different. I think people will have different opinions. Celtic gave him his debut when he was 16. They played him in some games. He wasn't eligible to play in the B team because of his age. You can't play someone at 15. I mean, you can, but I'm not sure it's a duty of care and all that. I think it's, I don't know. I don't know. But the point being, I think Celtic were kind of hamstrung a little bit with this one. What do you think? Also, the fact that if Liverpool come calling with the money, the Premier League whispering in your ear, quadruple your wages, all that stuff, I can see why people would be seduced. Stuart?
I would actually disagree slightly, and I think that I think it is obviously a weird phenomenon that you're noticing now in the top level of the game, where if you're good enough, you're old enough, and you could point to a couple of examples. You've got Max Dowman, Rio Ngamoa, Yamin Lamal, all of these players that are generational talents at the level at the clubs that they were at, and I think that they're probably, Celtic's B team pathway stuff is dreadful. It's dreadfully done, and we've talked that to death, and it's boring. But there is also probably has to be a slight change in attitude, that like if someone is good enough, then yeah, you can manage them and you can presumably put buffers, safeguards, railings, anything that you need, that you feel like you have to bubble wrap a player of that age in the man's game, especially at a club with the profile of Celtic. But that season in particular, Celtic were on their knees. If it was Postecoglou's first season that he came through, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Completely on their knees, bereft of talent, bereft of players in this big, massive turnaround. And I think if you had a player that they acknowledged they almost couldn't coach because he was so good, I think that maybe that's on Celtic to recognise that and find a pathway for him and find a way in to getting him. And albeit you're going back a few years, so maybe that change, I mean, Lamine probably hadn't quite broken onto the world stage at that point yet either. So it's maybe not as common to have 15, 16-year-olds that are doing that. But I think the way the game's going, if you had another Gannon Doak coming through, I think Celtic need to kind of be aware of that and try and get more. And obviously there's not much you can do if Liverpool come in and go, yeah, we're gonna take him and we're gonna develop him. Fine. But to say that we gave him games, he came on for a sub-appearance against Rangers, and I think he had maybe one other appearance.
Yeah, he came up
against that Dundee United game where Abada scored, so there were two
huge games.
Huge games, yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, I don't really think he was in and around the squad. I don't know what he would have been doing training-wise, but I don't know. I think there's just... It's one that's got away. There's not much that you were going to do about it, obviously, and I don't think that Celtic are set up to deal with a situation like that.
No, absolutely not.
But I just think that there are plenty of examples now of, Liverpool are going to go through some transition in the summer, but they're not going to go and put Ingamore out on loan because he's one of the most exciting young players in the world. So they're just going to have him, and that's him. He doesn't need to go and get his game time. And I guess some players are just kind of ready for that level, and maybe in Scotland, a player like Gannon Doak was ready for that level. Who knows?
Yeah, he made his debut. Well, he was on the bench a month after he turned 16, and then he plays those two games. I've heard various stories about how Celtic basically wanted to give him a taste of that, and then he didn't. He wasn't involved again, and whether that was because he wouldn't sign a new contract, maybe because he was going to go to Liverpool or whatever. Maybe Barry, it just doesn't seem like as Stuart says, doesn't seem like we're set up to really because Aidan McGeady makes his debut at 16 against Hearts, scores, and then he's always there or thereabouts because he's one of the generational talents. It just feels like we're not set up to deal with that in the modern game. Maybe, I don't know. Celtic as a club, I mean.
Yeah, and it's interesting though because obviously we had Karamoko the season before, didn't we, or 2 seasons before, and he was sort of involved in things, and it's a difficult one. I'm probably somewhere in the middle because I take your point, Gall. I think that was there much more we could do? We put him on in a game where we had to win to set us up going top of the league if we beat Rangers, and then we put him on in that game as well. So it wasn't as if we were just kind of doing it sort of pleasantries. It was kind of high octane games where the result was crucial. But I also see Stu's point, because if you think we were kind of almost similar to just now, just trying to get through games because of the lack of quality we had at the squad at times. We had lots of bad injuries that season as well. I remember Owen Moffat came on, didn't he, in the cup final before Christmas. So could Doak have had his minutes, for instance? And I remember we just had to kind of muddle through. I know it's a different position, but in centre of midfield we were muddling through with Rogic and Turnbull. So it's not as if we were kind of blessed with great squads like we would have been when McGeady was there, but McGeady still managed to find a way through. But I suppose ultimately it comes down to Celtic's incompetence across the board. Like, I agree with the point that Celtic aren't set up to deal with situations like that, but you could argue are they set up to deal with any situation in any area of industry? No. So, yeah. But to caveat all that, I think when Liverpool come calling, and I think there was talk even before we put him on, I think maybe it kind of felt like that was a kind of last throw of the dice to try and convince him to stay. We put him on in those games. You're kind of hamstrung by the kind of riches of the Premier League. So yeah, it's a difficult one, and he is an exciting talent. I know he's injured just now, but it would have been nice to have kind of sort of reaped the benefits of him his ability and at that time, but it wasn't to be ultimately.
Sure.
What was the name of the boy that went and signed for West Ham in the summer?
Cummings.
I find that an interesting one as well, because obviously I would love to know what's become of him. If he's not kicked the ball for West Ham as far as I'm aware. Maybe he's out on loan somewhere. But he was obviously Daniel Cummings, wasn't it? That was it. He was scoring right, left and centre for the B team, and I know it's a different level, but look at how much we've struggled this year, and look at how quickly the pecking order has got you down to your 4th or 5th choice striker. Wouldn't it have been nice to find some sort of pathway or some sort of minutes for a young, exciting player that's scoring lots of goals, as opposed to just signing Junior Adamu? Like, you know what I mean? And I guess it's maybe that sort of business model that you now have with the likes of a Callum Osmond, where when he was brought in, he was playing bounce games, pre-season games, and everyone was like, oof, he looks shit. He's not played football at all. Like, so that's not going to work out. And then actually when someone brings him into the fold, and he talked about that after the Rangers game, he's like how amazing it was to feel like he was being given a chance and being trusted and being backed by the manager, and then given his chance and he's taken it. And now, obviously in absentia, he's become the best striker at the club, and that may or may not be bore out. But, you know, you do have to have some sort of avenue, or at least remain open to it. And, you know, talk to Kieran about it on Monday. He'll give you 15 minutes on the pathways, but it's just something that we're dreadful at and we need to be better at. Yeah,
and I also think, like, see, there's a part of me that thinks Callum Osmond being kind of forced upon the management team of like Rodgers and him being like, well, I'm not going to play him, I don't care. And then Martin O'Neill looking at the squad saying, who can we use? It's two very different situations. And I think that's the concern, that we go into next season and we put a manager in charge and then we just force these players on him, as opposed to him having an opinion on them. Like, well, you're going to be using these guys, because I'm sure that's what Robbie Keane would do. Yeesh. Not for me. Not for me at all. Okay, quick fire.
You should have said.
Sharp.
You should have mentioned it.
I will. And I will keep doing that. Quick fire thoughts. Just some brief thoughts on news that we've maybe already covered this week that we haven't covered on the weekly. Celtic's Player of the Year, Stuart Duggan.
Are you asking who it is or why on earth they're doing it?
Just both, aye.
Who cares? That's just... Oh.
That's enough. That's fair. If that's all you want to give, that's enough.
That's what I think, yeah.
Barry, Celtic's Player of the Year.
Aye, it's just been it. Like, how often did we laugh at the Rangers Player of the Year events after we'd like won trebles and stuff like that? It kind of feels that there's just no need for it this year. It'd be interesting to see the ticket sales for the event itself whenever that comes around, but no, not for me.
Final one, start with you, Barry. Celtic monitoring Scott McKenna. It's just
to use Stuart's phrase from about 20 minutes ago, what year? Do you know what year it is? I don't like him. I kind of think the phrase cart horse comes to mind when I think of Scott McKenna.
He's actually pretty quick.
Yep. Left-footed, isn't he? I just remember his kind of battles with Morelos all those years ago. But no, I think that he's maybe a better version of Liam Scales, but that's not saying much. So no, that was the kind of our marquee defensive summer signing. I'd be, oh god, I would not be in a good state at all.
Yeah.
Yes. Jenkins.
I mean, but Stuart, they're talking about 10 million quid from him, so it's a non-starter anyway.
I think he's fucking garbage, and I've always thought that. And I think he's garbage. I thought he was garbage when he played for Aberdeen. I think he's garbage when he plays for Scotland. And him being a £10 million rated centre half is a classic game's gone, in my opinion. So fuck that. Get it so far away. I don't want any part of that.
Great stuff. That's our quickfire thoughts. We are going to... I had a couple other questions that we could do, but you know what? We'll probably just leave them to next week now, because we're certainly running out of time. We went over our time. But just your kind of thoughts on Celtic take on St Mirren. Actually, we got a question. We can finish on a question from Jim, I believe. Let me just get it up for you. Jim says... given the fragile nature of the league table, is this weekend's game the biggest of the season / run-in? I guess that's an interesting take in terms of potentially winning the Scottish Cup to guarantee Europa League and stuff like that. What's Barry? What's going on? Talk me through your thoughts.
It's just my mind's automatically turned to the Scottish Cup final if we haven't won the league, and just I bet it'll be pouring that day, and it'll be. Remember the game? Remember the O'Neill's last game?
Yeah,
20 odd years ago, and we won the cup. I know Sutton missed a penalty, didn't he? And I think Thompson scored the winner. But it was a sad end to 5 brilliant years under O'Neill, and the thought of that being his kind of sign off this time. Well, who knows? Maybe he'll get the job next year. But
in the showers,
yes. But just the thought of that kind of being a necessity to get his Europa League football just fills me with dread. Obviously, I would love take the trophy, no sort of shadow of a doubt, but I think Scottish Cup finals only have a real meaning, apart from maybe 95 because we were desperate for a trophy, but it only really adds weight to a season if you've won the league or you're going for a treble or whatever, and I know that's maybe entitled, but so be it. But if that's what we're having to do, we're putting everything into that. If we haven't won the league, it's going to be pretty bleak. Yeah, so I know that's not very a positive answer, but just kind of spilling out my thoughts as I envisage that situation unfolding.
Stuart, what's your thoughts about Sunday itself? Kick-off, 2 p.m, Hampden Park, St Mirren. Obviously, we played them at the weekend. Do you think they'll be buoyed by that, and maybe will they approach it the same way, or do you think they'll have different setups?
I think they'll probably approach it the same way, and I think that we'll approach it the same way, and I think it'll be the exact same game we've watched for the last 8 weeks, and I think it'll be brutal, and I think we might edge it, we might not. And with regards to one thing that keeps going through my head is we're probably not going to win all the games between now and the end of the season, so do you want to cough up this one in the hope that that's the loss out of the way, and then we win the other ones, or is it all about momentum? I think it is all about momentum, and I'd definitely rather be playing this week than next, because I think you've seen a drop-off in this Celtic team when they've gone week to week, as opposed to having midweek fixtures, almost like too much time to think about things is sort of fucked them up. So, yeah, you want to win it. Obviously, you want to win it, and it might be important when it comes to Europe, because I think if you didn't win it, and if you finish third, and you've got the rebuild, and also the Conference League, I think European football of that standard next year will be more of a burden than anything, whereas the Europa League could be an exciting platform to build from for a new team, new manager, new start. But hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Chilling vision of things to come from Stuart. Yeah, we've got the St Mirren game on Sunday, 2 p.m 'kickoff. Tomorrow on the Cynic, we've got the weekend update, which will look ahead to that game itself. And then on Sunday, we'll have the reaction to the game. Myself and Chris Boud will be there, and we'll react straight afterwards. This week on the Cynic, we've had the agenda on Monday, which went over everything at the weekend. We had the debrief, where we focused on the St Mirren victory with stats and tactics outlook. On Wednesday, we had Making a Modern Football Club, episode 4, the final episode of the series, where we basically retool what Celtic could be. And obviously, you're listening to the Cynic Weekly, 32 podcasts on average per month. Check out thecynic.co or search for The Cynic on Patreon. And also, we've got a live show. Come along, it'll be fun. But there's hardly any tickets, so buy them. Good stuff. This has been a joy. Kind of final thoughts, Stuart Duggan, before we head off?
Just that it's still a bit grim, but we're getting there. Do you know what? We're just talking the games off, and soon the season will be done. So that's one way to look at it. Yeah,
absolutely. Barry, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that Sunday will be a wee bit of a kind of welcome relief from the pressure of the league, but how pressure-free can a semi-final be, I suppose, but it's something a wee bit different, and as Stu says, I'd rather be playing than not. Hopefully we might see more of Engels, because I thought he was impressive when he came on. And yeah, who knows? I suppose the thing that's most interesting for me is kind of glancing at the bench now, to see if the likes of Johnson or Osmond are going to be anywhere near it to help us. And obviously, as we mentioned, the bounce game as well. So, no, I'll try and end positively. Hopefully, we can get a victory, book ourselves in the final, and then it gives us a wee boost for the final 5 league games.
Absolutely. Look, it's right in front of us. At this point, everything's up for grabs, so let's grab what we can. From Barry Gallagher, from Stuart Dugan, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly, and we'll speak to you down the road.